This episode is brought to you by InVeedHemp.com. So let's talk CBD for a minute. I bet you have seen it in the news these days. Your wife or family or friends have tried it, and all the pros seem to be using it. But what is CBD exactly? Well, CBD is short for cannabidiol. CBD is a chemical compound from the cannabis plant. It's all natural substance used in everything from oils and roll-ons to dog treatments. CBD gives you a feeling of relaxation and calm without the psychoactive part that cannabis does. Now, it doesn't get you stoned, but it has many organic rejuvenating effects that make your body feel great. When it comes to CBD, one of my favorite brands is Inveed. Their CBD products come in 3 varieties: Relief, Clarity, Relax, and Active. You've heard me talk in the past about how I use these products. I would never endorse a product that I didn't use and didn't believe in. Relief CBD products help relieve pain. Clarity allows you to focus on those critical shots. Relax CBD products are those for anxious golf moments, and Active is there to keep you and keep your game going. Right now, I have an incredible special for you. Go to InVeedHemp.com and use the promo code GURU20 for a 20% discount for life. Get your CBD today from Inveed, a source that I trust, know, and love. Now let's get to this week's episode.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha, covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, Director of Instruction at the beautiful Colleton River Club in Bluffton, South Carolina. Thank you so much for joining me on episode 124. And my guest tonight is Erik Barzeski. You can follow Erik on Instagram and Twitter at IACAS. That's ICAS. A little bit about Erik. He is the Director of Instruction and co-founder of Golf Evolution with his business partner David Wedzik, as well as the co-author of the book Lowest Score Wins. I highly recommend you go out and grab this book, as it is a must-read for all coaches and golfers. Erik is also the developer and administrator for the Sandtrap.com golf forum and website, which is one of the most popular golf websites in the world. Erik was also the 2019 Western North Carolina Section Teacher of the Year and is on the Golf Digest's Best In-State list and Best Young Teachers Under 40 as well. Oh, and in his spare time, he also coaches one of the top Division III college programs in the country, Penn State Bear Rand. Erik was also instrumental in helping to develop the 5 Simple Keys teaching framework with Chuck Evans, one of my good friends, and also has developed his own video teaching software. I've known Erik for several years now, and he is definitely one of the smartest guys that I've ever been around, which is why I was so excited to get him on the show. We go super deep into a variety of topics and subjects that include so many valuable ideas that will help you as a coach and also as a player out there as well. So without further delay, I give you the brilliant and talented Mr. Erik Barzeski. Enjoy. Erik Barzeski, man, welcome to the show, man. It's great to finally catch up with you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. How you doing?
Good. It's good to be on. Like I told you, it's one of my goals in 2021.
I'm honored. I want to start with a couple of things. I got tons of notes, and I appreciate you sending me some of your background stuff that I pretty much knew a lot of, but
right.
Learned a few new things and that hopefully you can share on the show, because I think your story and your journey is fascinating. But looking back through some of our old social notes, how did ICAS come about? Like, I think that's the mystery is your Twitter handle. And I don't know that anybody ever got to the bottom of it.
Well, it is out there if you search for it. But when I was 8, 9, 10, and I first signed up online, I was dialing into someone's garage, or something back then, and, you heard the modem noises and all that stuff, and he's like, well, you can't use your real name, you got to use a username. And so, I was probably a little bit older, 10, 12, and he's like, so I'm like, Erik was my first choice, and he's like, you can't do that, because there wouldn't be any other Eriks, although back then there might not have been, online. And so I picked IACAS, which then stood for I Adore Dina Smith, who I've been married to now for going on, quite a while, 17 years next May. But, I was 12 back then, so I joke with her all the time that I was playing the long game, and it worked out. But I guess my fallback was, I could always make it into another acronym, like I am cocky and sarcastic, or I am cool as shit, or whatever. But there's a bunch of ways you could go with that. But it's technically, it stands for I Adore Dina Smith, which was probably creepy when I chose it as a 12-year-old. But hey,
it sounds reasonable now that we're adults.
Yeah, it doesn't sound quite so creepy. So.
I like it. Yeah, that was one of the answers I saw that you gave. I think on the Sand Trap.
Yeah,
that was that I'm cool as shit or cocky and sarcastic, and I thought, well, that makes sense because. I mean, back in the day, like when we first met, like late 2008, 9 probably, you were a lot more controversial online. So what happened?
I still am. I just keep it inside my head now and do a lot more reading and a lot less talking. Like I said in the notes to you, John Graham, I called him my shield at a few conferences because I would like talk to him and then he would be ballsy enough to like say the stuff.
That's right.
And so... because he has a nicer affect than I do. So he would find a way to say the things that I was thinking and that we were talking about in a nicer way that didn't annoy quite so many people. But he said that, he wished people didn't have such a personal attachment to information or facts. And, that's something I've always struggled with. I come from a scientific background, and to me, facts are just facts. They're just what they are. They're not something that you can really argue about. And I struggle with I don't struggle with, in my opinion, the difference between facts and opinions. I feel like other people struggle with the difference between, like I can have a difference of opinion with someone and I don't feel personally judged by that. I mean,
right.
Are you offended if you like Rocky Road ice cream or vanilla and I like chocolate or whatever? No, nobody cares about that. But when it comes to like our careers and our jobs and how we raise our children or anything that actually matters and not just flavors of ice cream, then people start to get offended by differences of opinion when that's all they are. They're just opinions. And then, there are very few facts in what we do, but there are a few out there. And, I've learned to just, I stepped away. I didn't like officially step away. I just did more reading and a little less talking. In the past 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah, I think that's funny because I was talking to John not long ago when he was in town, and I was kind of thinking back to our relationship, and I think it was about the same time we met, kind of early Aimpoint days, right? We went on an Aimpoint Summit trip together, and I remember a lot from that trip, and I feel like we were doing a lot of that online stuff then and sort of gathering information, debating, and then now we're doing more activity, right? So we're teaching more, we're doing the stuff that we were sort of learning back in those days and putting it more into action. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, there was that was when I was first getting into stuff. I didn't turn professional as far as instruction goes until spring of 2010. And in fact, I just met Dave Wedzik, my teaching partner, in 2009 when I took lessons from him. Because I was frustrated that I got down to like a 1.4. I'm a bit better now, but I was down to a 1.4 as a golfer, and didn't hit a solid shot for 3 months in a row because every shot was like a groove thin, which is fine because they go straight and they go almost the same distance and it's fine. But like, you shoot the most unsatisfying 73s ever,
Right.
You don't hit a single shot solid. So I met Dave back then and had just turned professional. As far as instruction, shadowed him, shadowed a bunch of people, was was trying to absorb as much information as I can. I tend to have a somewhat obsessive personality as far as when I get into something, I go whole hog into doing everything I can to make myself as knowledgeable about the subject as I can, whether it's disc golf, which also ties into the aim point thing that we were at.
Yeah, that was on my list of topics.
Yep, or
we'll get to that.
Weimaraners or, whatever else there is that I get interested in.
Yeah.
And but since that time, golf has been pretty much the main obsession. Others come and go as I have time and stuff.
Well, take us back a little bit before that, because I don't want to jump ahead too much. Sort of paint the picture of what you were like as a kid, because I'm always fascinated about upbringings and influences early on, maybe with your parents, and then how you got into coaching, and then we'll get into a lot of the stuff that we were going to talk about with your professional career.
Yeah, my mom was a teacher, which was interesting because I was always the smart ass who, the other teachers all knew her. She worked for the state, so she was actually at a Catholic school while I was in the public schools where I lived, and so, but I knew that if I got in trouble, she'd hear about it before I got home. That she'd probably hear about it, through the grapevine during the day. But she was smart. My dad worked at General Electric. Never really quite figured out what he did there. So okay. he complained about some coworkers and worked overtime when he could get it, and had a good time. But no, he did a good job there. But my mom was off during the summers. My mom was actually kind of the one interested in sports as a kid. She was the one that I went to baseball games, Pirates games. She was the one I watched the Steelers with. She was the one I watched the Penguins with, and stuff like that growing up. So I played soccer from the time I was 3 on. And as a golfer, I think that it's interesting because I played tennis a little bit here and there, but soccer was my main thing. I played left wing because to me my 2 feet were basically the same, and so I was the only kid that could kind of cross the ball from the left side of the field. But that taught me about spin, and you probably would say most people, if there's OB left, most people are just going to leave the face wide open to the right. They're just going to block the ball over that way. Me, I'm the guy who's going to swing to the left because I know that makes the ball curve to the right. And so, there's a few other people I've met that are kind of like me, but I think my soccer and tennis upbringing taught me to almost control the ball with spin and not necessarily with the face. And it's, I don't talk about that a lot because I don't know that it's that interesting, but
I think it is for sure. Who's the other person that you said is kind of like you? I'm curious.
I've had a few students that are kind of like that as well, but okay. Most of them, like my college kids, most of my students, I see my college kids actually playing a lot more than I see a lot of my students playing. But, the third hole at our home course has OB up the whole left side. And, of course, they all swing to the right. And occasionally they leave the face over there and just hit a big push. But they hook the ball over that way a lot more often, even though they're, subconsciously swinging to the right. Dave said a long time ago that path is instinctual because, the face, every instructor knows that. The face is right. Someone has a weak grip or whatever, for whatever reason, the face is open, so they swing left, they swing left, they swing left. Their bodies keep trying to pull the ball to the left because instinctively, swing to the left is how you should fix that, and then, it's just a vicious cycle. I've always been kind of the other way just because of, I think, my tennis and soccer background. I knew you would, you curve a golf ball the same way you curve a soccer ball, so to me, kicking the ball, making your foot go to the left makes the ball curve to the right. And so that's always been kind of the way I've always thought about controlling the ball, which is a little odd, I think. Most people are, as you probably would say, face dominant in that. So
for sure.
Yeah. Picked up golf. I played varsity and junior varsity soccer as a freshman, but that summer before, my cousin took me to a golf camp. We just hit 5 woods, I think, and chipped and putted for an hour each. And I remember thinking the ball was going so far, which it is because, we can all hit pitching wedges out of Major League Baseball stadiums. And I'm sure my 5-wood was probably going 110 or something that day. Who knows? But to a kid, that seemed ridiculously far. And so, I was hooked right away. I'm sure I whiffed half the time or something. that first day, but I was kind of hooked, and obsessive personality kicked in. I bought a 7-iron off a used club rack at a local golf course and read everything I could that previous year or over the winter, because we have winters up here where we live, unlike you. And I remember my swing when I came out. I read that in Golf Digest and stuff that the bad golfer had a reverse pivot and they sliced the ball. So I moved way off the ball and made darn sure that the ball hooked. I figured, okay, I'll just do the opposite of whatever bad golfers do, and I'll be pretty good. And it was okay. I improved a good bit each year. I went from 90s to 80s to 70s. Made the all-conference team, and our high school team had success my senior year, and all 3 years that I was there, and 2 years after I left. And I did okay. Got down to low single digits and won the Erie District Junior Golf Association tournament my third year playing golf. So I guess I did okay on that. But yeah, didn't play much in college because the college coach was a football coach who said I have one spot on the team, even though all the kids shot in the 80s. And so the guy I tried out with shot in the 70s with me, and he offered the spot to me, and I said, what about Jimmy, or whatever his name was? And he said, well, I only have one spot. And so I said, well, I don't want it. You don't care about having the best team. And so I called Jimmy, and I said, hey, the spot's yours. And he said, why? You beat me by 2 or something. I told him the story, and he said, well, I don't want it either. So neither of us played. So didn't play much in college. Played a little bit when I moved to South Florida.
Tell them where you went to college.
Ohio Northern University in Ada, Ohio. We were the college that was farthest from a McDonald's in the United States when I was there.
Okay.
We had to drive to Lima, Ohio to get to the nearest McDonald's, which is where Glee was fictionally set.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I went there for pharmacy, and then found out that I'd be standing behind a counter for the rest of my life, telling Mrs. Smith to, when to take her pills and stuff. And so switched to medicinal chemistry, got a degree in French, and took enough computer science classes that I got a degree in that too. So just took those for fun, but, so haven't spent a day in my life doing anything actually professionally with chemistry, but, comes in handy now and then.
Well, you did work at the Apple Genius Bar for a minute, right?
Yeah, I worked I was a Mac genius at the Apple Store.
Just for fun?
Yeah, partly to have an excuse to get out of the house because I was doing computer consulting and stuff. Partly for the hardware discount, and partly for health insurance. So,
I love it.
Yeah, had a couple of reasons, but it was right around the time they were starting to, turn stuff around, so it was a good time.
All right, so you meet Dave Wetzik, right? And that kind of led you to starting to coach. So take us through that.
Yeah, even after I moved back up here to Erie, Pennsylvania in late 2004, even then I'd watch the local guy giving some lessons on the range, and it was a lot of like, didn't I just read that last week in Golf Digest? Or
yeah.
Or it was a lot of like, seriously, like, he'd say 17 things. And then the golfer would hit one good because they've been swinging the 7-iron for 30 minutes, so they figured something out for themselves. And he goes, there you go, you did it. You did what? You did one of those 7? No, you just kind of hit 5 more like that, and let's see. So that was my impression of golf instruction. It didn't seem to have any cause and effect. It didn't seem to have any. It was just a guy standing there saying a bunch of stuff and hoping that the student had a good time and felt like they got better at the end. Dave I talked to him for an hour before I even took a lesson.
What were some of the questions that you asked him? That would be interesting to know, because I know you probably were grilling him on his ideas and philosophies.
That was a long time ago, but I'm sure it was a lot. Like, Dave, so to get into that part, Dave worked with Mike Bender as a student and as a range assistant, and he gave some lessons and stuff like that. When Dave was playing the mini tours, Dave had Nike Tour status for a year, finished third, maybe in Chattanooga or something, I don't know, but did well, was third or fifth or something on the driving distance list that year, and worked with Mike Bender. Mike Bender at the time was also coaching Mike Bennett. So Dave was still friends with Mike Bennett. Mike Bennett, in the time that Dave had moved to Texas and then kind of got out of golf a little bit, playing anyway, had obviously gone with Andy Plummer to Mac O'Grady, and trust me, I don't know the exact timeline of all this stuff, so I'm going to be pretty vague about that stuff. I think
okay.
I think I have the timelines about right, but anyway, around 2009 or so, they were together as doing Stack and Tilt. It was 08 or 09. I think the book came out in 09.
That's right.
So Dave was starting to teach Stack and Tilt. I had reviewed the book. I had read about it, done a bit of research. Again, still just a player in 2009. And so I asked him a lot of questions about that. And the thing that's attractive about Stack and Tilt, and the thing they tried to do right and got a lot of right, was classifying commonalities of the game's best players, not just fundamentals. Grip is fundamental. You have to grip the club, but there are a bunch of different grips that work, and we see that still. So, they got a lot of that stuff right. But, they tried to classify the commonalities into, weight forward, hands in, and, shoulder down, those things, those, 10 words that became, I think, 12 words or whatever they were.
Right.
So Dave was teaching that. Dave was, and again, I don't want to misspeak for, on behalf of other people or anything, but Dave was, not a lot was out there about Stack and Tilt. It was fairly new. So Dave was kind of teaching it as like a Mike Bender, who also had spent some time with Mac, of course. Mike Benderized, pattern that's kind of Mac O'Grady-ish, and, it was kind of a mixture of all that stuff.
Kind of a hybrid, right?
Yeah, so we didn't teach an extreme version one way or the other. We taught that the trail knee extended a little bit, not fully straightened, of course, but extended a little bit. And because that was extending, there would be an actual pressure shift, not necessarily a weight shift into the right foot. We taught that a lot of the side bending came from the hip slants and the angle of the pelvis and that kind of stuff, and not just literally bending your spine left 25 or 35 degrees or anything. So we had our own little tweaks to it. Pretty early on, I had bought like literal bathroom scales, and we stood there and saw how easy it was to, like, if you moved like half an inch, how much of your weight would actually shift to one foot or the other. So just standing there and moving your arms to the right, that alone would move your weight, 60-40. So we taught what we called basically a relatively centered pivot swing. And so a lot of my early questions in 09, and I keep saying we taught because I turned professional in 2010, partly as a result of having worked with Dave. But a lot of my questions were about cause and effect, and the fact that he seemed to have an answer. He used the word geometry, which, and could explain, how the structure of the arms and your anatomy and that kind of stuff. He basically seemed to have reasons for things instead of just like, let me just say a bunch of stuff and maybe one of those things will make the guy better and whatever. So that's what attracted me to him as a student. And then as I was learning, I just became interested in, oh, wow, so there's actually cause and effect. There's actually this leads to that, and so on. So there's actually a process. There's actually, a strategy to, how you can go about giving a golf lesson. People don't like the word system or something like that, but, there can be a framework that you can work within.
I like that word, framework.
To provide some guidance for a thing. Nobody likes a model. That's a word that sometimes comes and goes in popularity, but, because everyone doesn't have the same swing, because everyone doesn't have the same capabilities or the same body type or anything like that, but or even the same preference in ball flight. So he was the first person that opened my eyes to the fact that you could have some cause and effect, some geometry, some physics, something like that in the golf swing. He was the first person that made it seem like it was actually like somewhat scientific,
right.
Problem solving, not just making stuff up and hoping something worked.
Your faith in golf instruction was renewed a little bit.
Yeah. So, like everyone then, you get the yellow book and the golfing machine and you start reading through that and, it's still good for, some terminology. It still gives us some things that we can use to talk about things with other instructors and stuff like that. And then, you start to read about, you read all about Michael Grady and all he did, and you read about this guy and all they did, and, you do a lot of reading early on when you're obsessive, and so then you start to see that, okay, there's lots of causes and effects, but it's still within a good framework of geometry and physics. We're still governed by anatomy and all that stuff, so...
That lead you to the 5 simple keys. That kind of was about that time.
Yeah, and that was Bob Koch lived in Cleveland, and he started Medicus with the Hinge Club. Everyone calls it the Medicus, but the Medicus is the company, and it was technically called the Hinge Club, which I think is still the number 1 selling training aid in the world. It's in a lot of garages and basements, so...
As it should be.
Yeah. And but Bob Koch made the Stack and Tilt DVDs, the first ones. And so he worked with Mike and Andy to make those. They sold very well for a long time. And so he knew Chuck Evans. We met Chuck Evans through Bob Koch, and did a school down in Phoenix. We also did a school in Phoenix several years earlier, spring of 2010, with Mike and Andy. Dave had organized that and put that together. But yeah, a couple years later, Bob Koch introduced us to Chuck Evans. Dave Wedzik and Chuck were the primary guys, but I helped kind of do a lot of the work behind the scenes as far as like putting an instructor manual and stuff together. Dave and Chuck filmed a set of 5 Simple Keys DVDs that sold pretty well for a number of years. So far as we know, the best-selling golf instruction DVDs for 3.5 years running. Medicus bought a lot of infomercial time on Golf Channel and stuff at the time, which helped. So we trained some instructors. We did that for 3.5 years or so. Trained over 100 instructors, including some top 100, top 50 guys that came to our classes, not because of anything other than the fact that people who rank highly on lists and things like that, such as yourself, are constantly looking to learn from other people, even if they don't necessarily think that those other people are better than them or worse than them or anything like that. They're just, you can learn a lot from going to watch a guy that you think is a terrible golf instructor. You can learn a lot, even if what you learn is what not to do. But we were fortunate to, train over 100 people in our system, and if I look back at the lessons I give, they still fit the 5 Simple Keys, and it was just another way of, in our opinion, kind of clarifying, similar to what Stack and Tilt did as far as like commonalities, but not so much hands in and the same things, a little bit more of the results rather than the specific like body parts doing things.
Yeah, what can you go a little more in depth for those instructors out there that don't know what 5 Simple Keys is? Because I think it was great, because at that time, and Chuck's a good friend of mine as well, I was just starting at Carmel and kind of developing my own framework, and it's very similar, what I call my mastermind skills. It kind of lines up with that, but I think it would be interesting to kind of give them, like, talk about the 5 keys and then how that's influenced the way you teach now. Yeah,
so we would say at the time that if you're teaching a full swing lesson that doesn't fit into one of those 5 keys, then you're probably just doing something for looks or something. It maybe wasn't the best lesson out there, but the keys are, key 1 is steady head, which doesn't mean still, it doesn't mean unmoving, it doesn't mean locked in place, it just means relatively steady. A guy playing darts isn't moving his head all over the place. He's pretty much here, even if there's a little bit of movement. Good putters aren't moving their heads around a bunch, but they're not in a vice, stuck. So relatively steady, not moving around a whole lot. So relatively centered pivot. We're not moving way off the ball and way into the ball. Generally speaking, we would say that there's more degrees of freedom allowed with the driver because it's on a tee and we don't have to be quite as precise, and it's more about power than precision per se, but relatively steady. Key 2 is weight forward. We clarified that as on the downswing because of what we know happens during the backswing. Weight and pressure can shift to the trail side. Key 3 was inline impact because though we still think it's pretty rare having the shaft leaning too far forward, is not good either, but certainly we see a lot more people with the shaft not forward enough at impact. We see too many shaft vertical to slightly leaning back or not enough forward. So key 3 was inline impact. Those 3 keys, if you can do those, we would say you can strike the ball cleanly. Key 4 was diagonal sweet spot path, which just meant controlling the path of the club. Not swinging the club straight up and down or too far around you, just whatever plane, quote unquote, that you were going to swing on, to control that and to control the path of that club head into the ball. And then key 5 was club face control, which obviously those two have to match up. So those control the flight of the ball. If you can strike it well, you can, and then you got to control the flight of the ball. And so, we would check golfers, and the more keys you had, the better the player you were. And so it became kind of a simple system for people to say, okay, I don't hit the ball that well. I probably should look at one of these first 3 things. And golfers appreciated this simplicity. Now, there's a million different things you could do that could cause you to not get your weight forward. It might be a reaction to this or that or something else. But, at least you had some kind of a narrowed focus to where to look to change stuff. So, and if you look back at a lot of your lessons, whether it's our system or your system or whatever, almost every lesson you give should fit into probably one of those things. Otherwise, what are you doing? Because if you're not improving contact and you're not improving the ball flight of the ball, there's not much else to it.
You're making pretty golf swings that don't work.
You could, I suppose you could say speed, is in there, but some of those other things feed into that as well. So,
right. I like it. Yeah. I think it was really, condensing of, like you said, a lot of what Mac figured out and trying to make it more simplistic for the average golfer to understand S&T. I thought all that stuff was very valuable, even though, you might not like every single piece of it. Mm-hmm. It's hard to argue with those 5 simple keys, I think.
Yeah. So, we were fortunate, like I said, to have worked with a lot of people. It's kind of how we met, Chris Como. We went to Dr. Kwan and met him down there at Texas Women's University and stuff. And
tell me about that visit. What did you guys do? What came out of that?
That was after. Didn't Brian call it the greatest day in golf instruction ever,
yes,
or something like that? So we had booked a trip. We weren't on that one. I'm not in that picture. We had booked a trip to visit Dr. Kwan and Chris a few months before, and then a couple weeks before Brian went down. And we're like, well,
that's right. Yeah.
All right, so that's good. That means we're probably not wasting our time going down there. So that's good. So that was fun, and I have a bunch of pictures of Dave and Chuck in their skivvies, because Dr. Kwan liked to stick the markers directly onto your skin and everything. So that was a good day. And, the most valuable part of that day, honestly, was not watching Dave swing and, or anything like that. In his underwear, yeah. But just getting to sit around and chat. Mike McLaughlin was there and a bunch of other guys that we were there with. The best part of that day was just getting to sit around and talk with Chris, but also mostly Dr. Kwan, and just ask him questions and just say, okay, so, yeah, sure, we got this, and, we got whatever, but if you really just want to swing faster, like how much of this is, ground reaction forces, and how much of this is like, okay, yeah, you can extend your left knee a little bit faster or something like that, but he's like, well, just swing your arms faster. Like, that'd be the simplest way. And so we're like, okay, thank you.
That was it? The secret to golf?
Yeah, just swing your arms faster. And, for a while there, I think that, so that was the early days of like ground reaction forces and stuff like that. I forget when the trip was and when Swing Catalyst came out, but we got one of the first ones there. That led to a whole kerfuffle. And then
okay, back up. You gotta talk about that. You had that in your notes. You said you pretty much left, or didn't leave, but severed S&T ties because of Swing Catalyst. Like, is that what you're talking about?
There was a bit there. I forget what year the Stack and Tell 2.0 DVDs came out. They used the Sam Balance Lab in that.
Yes.
And we went up to the golf lab in Toronto because we were curious, because the stuff on the videos didn't seem to match up with what we thought to be true. So we went to the golf lab, found out that you kind of have to enter a manual sync time at the time for the sand balance lab to synchronize to the video that you were recording. And so we had video of Dave with his left foot completely in the air, and then he would stomp it down. But while it was in the air, if it synced up to the video, it was showing 100 or 98% of the pressure under his left foot.
So it's a timing thing.
While it was in the air. And so that explained a lot about the DVDs at the time and some of the information in them. Then we had, obviously, swing catalyst data of good players, and one in particular, but that didn't line up with kind of what was in those DVDs. And so we had gone to them before and said, hey, we have this information. And part of it included the fact that, you guys say that, extend your trail knee, that would put more pressure into the ground under the trail foot. So that's partly explaining what we're seeing, right? If you see the pressure shift to the right because you're extending your right knee, you're pushing into the ground by extending that knee, and the left knee is flexing, so it's decreasing pressure there. When you're jumping, you're increasing pressure, you're extending your knees. So it kind of explained that stuff to us, and we said they could say, yes, see, this is showing that good golfers extend their trail knee. But they didn't want to hear too much about it then, which was a little disappointing, because we just wanted to have a discussion, I think, at the time. We were still, I hate to use the word, but kind of in the camp at the time, but even though we'd kind of been teaching a hybrid thing for a while. But if anything hastened our removal from their good graces, that was it, because we had published an article, and all of us had written it. My name happened to be the one that I published it under.
The Shield.
Which did me no favors, yeah. But to this day, nobody's really been able to contradict anything that was said in it, really. But it certainly upset a number of people.
That's too bad.
But that was a while ago, so yeah. But that was when the swing catalyst came out, so it was right around the time that ground reaction forces were starting to become a hot thing, and they still are a little bit, although not quite as much as maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I think you'd probably agree with that.
Yes.
But, I think a couple years ago we went to see Mike Duffy at Penn State because, in our opinion at the time, while ground reaction forces were important and stuff like that, everyone has some. Nobody has zero. Okay, but even if you did have zero, you're not going to take someone that swings 80 miles an hour and make them swing 97 miles an hour just by improving ground reaction forces. Partly, ground reaction forces are, it's in the name, it's a reaction to what you're doing with the rest of your body. I love the people that say you get power from the ground, and Sasha McKenzie just said it the other day, and it was in a video, and I DM'd him on Twitter and said, thank you for finally saying this, because I've been saying it for a while. The ground is inert. It's just sitting there. You do all the work. The ground doesn't give you any power at all. You apply force and pressure and stuff to the ground, and it's inert and just doesn't move, so it pushes back against you. But you're doing all the work, so the ground doesn't give you any power. But we thought for a while that ground reaction forces, while the hot new topic in golf, was getting a little bit overstated because, that still rotates you like a clock face. It rotates you this way. But the golf swing is still mostly more about swinging your arms around you fast, turning your body fast, and stuff like that. And there's, of course, the shear forces and stuff like that, and ground reaction forces. Of course, you need to have friction under your feet to be able to turn as well. But ground reaction forces tend to be more in the vertical plane, and it has less of an effect, we felt, than was being talked about in golf at the time. A lot of people seemed to be really talking about it, and I don't know that it was going to lead to massive changes in how fast people swung or how well they swung. Outside of normal golf instruction, you need to get your pelvis here, you need to, and then your knee reacts by doing this, and so on. So, people were teaching ground reaction forces 70 years ago. They just weren't calling it that.
Right.
There's very little new in golf. A lot of it's recycled stuff and whatnot. People were teaching the 5 simple keys for 100 years. Nobody ever called them that, or maybe even clarified or classified them that way. But they've been teaching them for, forever.
Yeah, it's just nice that we can measure stuff, right? I mean, but again, it's up to us as the coaches to give that or whatever we want to do for the, to change the pattern of the student. Mm-hmm. So that's up to to the coach, which I think is often overlooked. Like the TrackMan or Swing Catalyst per se doesn't have a philosophy. It just tells you what's going on, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. When you first started out, I want to see if you're similar to me in this. I get to flip the tables here and ask you some questions. What changed the most when you first started teaching, as far as the amount of information you gave to your students? I'm just going to phrase it that way. From your first 50 lessons to your number 500 to 550, the amount of information you gave to your students.
It's become much, much less.
Yeah, the longer you teach, the less information you actually tell your students.
Yeah, exactly.
You keep simplifying, you keep saying less and less and less. And I say my job is to have an ocean of knowledge, but, I used to say I'd give someone a coffee cup. Now it's like a teaspoon. And pretty soon it's going to be an eyedropper.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was talking about this to my boss the other day because, I'm still fairly new at my new club, and he's watched me give a few lessons. He's like, it's amazing how simplified you make the information, but how quickly the results happen, right? I mean, right. But I wanted him to know that comes from thousands and thousands and thousands of lessons and information that is going, from all the years I've been teaching, that has been cultivated over the years to get to that solution that seems very simple from the outside looking in. It's not simple, right? So when we're starting out with coaching, we're telling them a lot because we're, like you were saying before, with that first guy that you were watching teach, that's all he probably knew. So he was throwing as much out there at the student as possible, just hoping something stuck. And
you're almost trying to prove to them that you're worth them paying you what they're paying you.
Exactly.
And you're almost trying to prove to yourself that you're see, I know all this stuff.
Right.
Look at how smart I am. And it's it's not about that at all. It's just the results matter. Whether the student has a good time matters, of course. And the less you tell them, the more. Somebody once I read, it might have been Brett McCabe. He said, you're going to remember 7 things about our meeting today. And one of those things might be he was wearing a red shirt. One of them might be I was really hungry. You can't control what those 7 things are. So if you give them 8 things, you're already, if 3 of them are the color of your shirt and the fact that the person had to go eat pizza afterward, you're already down to 5 things. So, if you can tell them 1 or 2 things, or 3 things maybe at the most, then there's a good chance they might remember those 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, and I think you've got to repeat those things because, as teaching average golfers, they're constantly telling you what they think they need to be doing or what, the information is coming out. So you don't have any room a lot of times to put new stuff in because they're already, the flow of consciousness is going both directions. So I'm always constantly trying to correct them as far as, all right, this is what we're working on. I'll write it. I have a grease board in my building now that I write what we talked about. If it's bigger than that grease board, then we've definitely done too much.
Yeah.
Plus, it keeps them focused. So it's as soon as they add another thought or another idea, then it's interrupted, I think, what you're trying to get done in that lesson. That makes sense.
Yeah. You have to have the confidence, I think, as a coach to say, I could answer that question, but you don't need to know that right now. And, let's get back to what we're talking about.
Oh my gosh, that is such a pet peeve of mine. I've got a few students that, great. I'm really glad you're curious about all this stuff, but it's interrupting the fact that what I'm telling you is really what we need to do in order to make progress.
Right.
And when you ask that question and I give you an answer, now we're on another track that possibly couldn't be any farther from what we're actually trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a weird thing, confidence in a golf lesson is important. You have to have the confidence to know that what you're saying is right. You have to have the confidence to know that what you're saying is understandable and relatable and that you're going down the right path. And occasionally you have to have the confidence to say, you know what? I could have gone one of two directions today. I chose this way because I thought that might work. This isn't working at all.
Right.
And if you're too far in, you have to say, you know what, I'm not charging you for this because we could have gone two ways. Come back, let's go the other way, and that'll work. And to go that way, or to say, if it's early enough in the lesson, that way is not working. I'm going to give you something else. We're going to go a different way. You're just, whether it's your, the limitation you have in your hip or something like that, or whatever it is, it's just not working.
Yeah, that might not have come out in the interview, and they've decided to share it to you 30 minutes in.
Yeah,
you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. I would have loved to have known that when I asked you that question earlier.
Yeah.
So, I got so many questions to kind of follow up on that, and you're welcome to ask me anything. That's cool that you flipped it around a little bit, but like, what are some of the questions that you ask a new student or even some of your current students that allows you to help them better in the interview process?
I don't do a big interview beforehand. I don't do a lot of like physical screens and stuff beforehand. I feel like, to me, a lot of that comes out. People, in my experience, want to get kind of down to it. They don't want to spend 20 minutes doing a physical screen and stuff. I know other people do it, and that's fine. I tend to ask them if they have any limitations. They'll obviously tell you some obvious ones, like, oh, I just had my knee replaced or whatever, but it's fine now, or something. Or they'll say, I tend to feel like the physical limitations come out as you're working with them, if you ask them to get to a position, or even, if you try to put them there and they make a sound or it won't quite go there, you can ask them about it. Yeah, you can kind of ask them, right, yeah, you can ask them about it then, be like, oh, is this painful, or it's like, I messed up my shoulder back in high school football or something. Be like, okay, all right. And then you can adapt on the fly there a little bit and say, okay, well, then we're going to get as much out of it as we can and be happy with that, or something like that. But I ask what their ball's doing right now. I ask what the shot they love to hit when they're playing well. What shot do they hit? Mm-hmm. And half the time they lie and say, well, it's a little draw, and you find out, as they're hitting, it's a massive pull draw. It's not really a good draw.
Or I love to hit it straight. I
hit it straight. It's like, okay, yeah. I joke with myself that if I charged an extra $5 per lesson, if they said the word consistent, and then gave them free lessons for life if they didn't say the word consistent, I would still be way up on this. I'd be making way more money.
I love that.
So they all say that. So yes. I don't even try to whatever. I don't even refute that anymore. I just kind of just ignore it and move on.
I'm the same way.
Because every PGA Tour player would use the same word too. I just want to be more consistent. Well, no kidding.
Yeah.
If I hit my 7-iron within a 10-foot radius every time I hit it, guess what? I'd win every golf tournament ever played at every level. So, yes, we want to be more consistent. That goes without saying. I asked them what the ball flight does when they hit bad shots. Nobody seems to rate their contact as badly as it is. On the sand trap, it's less now. I think people are starting to realize. We'd get 15 handicappers who would come on and say, I'm a great ball striker, but my putting is terrible. It's like, no, you're not. Unless you have the yips, like, really badly, you are not a good ball striker. Ball striking is everyone has a different level. I'm a +2 right now, and I would say my ball striking is terrible. It's obviously better than most 7s, but most 7s, their ball striking isn't that good, but it's better than a bunch of 12s. So I asked them some general questions about their ball flight. What I tend to find is, I try to ask questions that more tell me about who they are and how they see themselves than what they actually get out of golf. Because a lot of people, like I said, they say, oh, my good ball flight's a draw. Well, you find out it's a massive pull draw because of something they're doing.
They don't even understand the language.
It's not really a good draw, but it tells me that, I asked them what ball flight, if they could pick which way they would go, whether they would want to see the ball fall to the right or fall to the left. And that tells you a lot about who they are, not necessarily about how they play golf. And so it's more a matter of, figuring out how they kind of communicate, how they see themselves as a golfer, because they'll give you a lot of clues as to what they're looking for. If you don't fix what they're there for, or at least convince them that they think they're there because they want this, but really they need to work on this. You can change their minds on some things here and there, but if you don't fix what they're there for, then that's maybe not necessarily the most successful lesson in their opinion. And at the end of the day, they're the ones paying you. So ideally, you want to fix what they're there for to fix.
Yeah.
If they say, oh, I'm hitting the ball and I slice it, and you see that their contact is bad, you might give a lesson where you fix the contact, but you better be fixing the face-to-path relationship while you do that as well.
Sure.
And so at the end of the lesson, you can say, like, look, you haven't started a ball to the right, or you haven't had a path that's been left this entire time. You might hit some pushes now, if you don't get the face closed, but your path has been to the right this whole time, and your contact is better. So you can still phrase it in a way that, says, okay, look, your slice is fixed, but also, by the way, your contact is way better.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So, I keep it to 5 minutes. I usually do it while they're warming up. I watch their ball flight. I watch their swing. You can see a lot with your eye. I think the teachers Dave Wedzik said this, he said all those teachers with a good eye, you have a good player, for example, who stalls his, follow-through pivot a little bit, and the hands kind of overtake a little bit, and occasionally hits that flip hook left. You can kind of start to see that. You see that pattern. You see that ball flight occasionally, and you kind of know where to look. And you can look at it on video. You can look at it on whatever, but you kind of know where to look. And those are the teachers with a good eye. You're not seeing it, but kind of like, okay, this is one of two things, I think, and you know where to look pretty quickly. I'm constantly too evaluating myself in lessons, and I'm sure you do it too. After a lesson, you look back and you go, darn it, you know what? I shouldn't have said that right then. Mm-hmm. Maybe I shouldn't have said it at all. Maybe I should, and whatever. You're constantly kind of critiquing yourself, and you have to, and there are times when, I get done with a lesson and I'm like, you know what? That was not a good lesson. And the student's happy and they've left and they are happy and stuff like that. But maybe you said a little bit too much there that got you off topic for 5 minutes that, maybe you should have been more confident and said, you know what, let's not worry about that.
Yeah.
And the more you teach, the better you get at that stuff and everything. But
do you ever film yourself? I've
Yeah.
done that in the past. It's been super helpful. I do it now just because I have my app that a lot of times
Right.
I'll just film some clips of our live lessons, and I always look back and go, wow, that was, my body language wasn't good, or I didn't answer that question quite clearly enough.
Right. And I find some verbal tics. I say the word okay a lot.
Yeah, the non-words.
Or right. You've probably caught me saying it right a lot on this podcast. Things like that. Yeah, for sure. James Hirschfield, you might recommend or remember. We worked with him a long time ago.
Yeah.
He was here for a year and a half or so. He was very good about, being excitable for students, and that was always fun, and that's something I took away. We give students high fives and fist bumps, and it's good to be excited kind of for the student when they're learning, because then they get excited and stuff like that. So sometimes I'll watch a video and be like, you know what, it's a little bit of fake it till you make it. One of the things that when I was a Mac Genius, I'm not the person that most people would say could deal with people and computer problems, because I'd be like, give me that, let me fix it, you idiot. Here's your computer, it's fixed. Go away. That's how a lot of people would have the impression of me, right, during computer service. And in my mind, maybe that's how it went. But I cared enough about Apple at the time, because they were still, again, coming back from struggling. My mom was a teacher, so I'd always use Apple products. But I cared enough about Apple at the time that I wanted to represent them well and take care of things. And I'd start off every session with somebody by giving them my card, which had our email address on it. And I would say, good or bad, please send an email if you have a moment to tell them how your experience was today, before I did anything. Because then I was on notice too, a little bit. And there was a newsletter, called Apple of Our Eye, that went out to retail store employees, and they would put 3 or 4 or 5, emails that they got from across the company, in all the stores. And I was in every other or every third one with a positive email that somebody had sent in. And so, long way of saying, in recording yourself, sometimes you can notice, like, okay, look, my energy was down in that one. I need to get back to being a little bit more excitable for the student, a little bit more, awesome job, that was great, and stuff like that. So golf lessons are fun, I mean, they should be fun. You're helping someone get better. You're helping someone enjoy life a little bit more. Dave says it's corny, but like, if you play better golf, you go home, you don't kick the cat, you don't like, yell at your wife, or whatever. You just feel better about yourself. You feel better about the world. If you play better golf, you hit better shots, you feel better about everything. So it's a small way of making the world a better place.
I was going to ask you about the Genius Bar and what, if there were any learning moments that helped you in your golf instruction and your coaching. And I think that you just described it, right?
Yeah, there was a bunch. Although, I was very good at, and still am, very good at computers and using computers and programming and whatever. And so I always think it's tough to teach people to do things that you do well, kind of just already. Mm-hmm. I'm good at math, and teaching my daughter math I'm just like, you just do it. Like, don't you see it? Like, you just do it. I don't know. Like, how do you teach math? And my wife was a math teacher. My mom was a math teacher. So they weren't as good at math as I am, but so they probably had a leg up on me in terms of teaching stuff. But I think I learned a little bit about how, and I was never an awesome player. I mean, I'm a +2 right now, and that's working my butt off to get there. But even in high school and stuff, I was at best like a 3 or something. So, it didn't just come naturally to me. I had to work at it pretty hard. So teaching golf was a little bit easier because it didn't just come naturally to me. I had to understand stuff and work at stuff. But for the times when, like at the Apple Store, that stuff came naturally to me and stuff. So I had to try to find a way to step back and put myself in their shoes and say, okay, like, they don't understand the whole desktop paradigm. They don't understand that it's supposed to be laid out like literal desktop, with like files and like, they don't understand all that stuff. I taught some computer classes as well, and things like that. And that's tough when it comes naturally to you. And so, it taught me a little bit about that. I'm not going to say it was a mind-bending experience, but it did teach me a lot about how to deal with people who don't think the same way that you do about something, and how to take something that you do pretty naturally and be able to simplify it and start over.
Yeah. That I remember, I was asking you before, thinking we were texting about research and anything you were kind of looking into. And I remember, I think me and John Graham were talking about some different things with putting, and you guys did a really interesting research project on the effect of like the lie angle of the putter and how that affected start direction. And I was asking John, I was like, well, how did you come up with that? He goes, well, I just gave it to Erik, and he did like a trigonometry problem and did all these numbers. Like, do you remember that? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah.
What came out of it? Because I thought I use that information to this day.
Yeah, he was partly curious about how, like, for example, if you're on a 4% slope, the putter is above your feet or below your feet. And so even if you hit the ball in the same exact way and your setup's the same and everything like that, but the ball is below your or above your feet, technically, as we know with like a 7-iron, the loft of the club is pointing in a different direction. Mm-hmm. And so he was curious at the time how much that affected things. And so I came up with just some trigonometry, like you said, to where you could plug in any loft and any, degree slope to figure out how much where the face would be pointing. And obviously with putting, oftentimes you have 1 or 2 degrees of loft only or something like that. So in putting, it doesn't affect it much, because if you had 0 degrees of loft, you could have any lie angle and it doesn't matter. It's pointing in the same direction. You're just rotating a perfectly vertical surface around itself, so it didn't matter. So a 4% slope, even with a 1 degree loft at impact putter, is going to affect the start line almost nothing at all.
Interesting.
So he was like, okay, so I don't have to worry about that. Okay, good. Yeah, check. Done.
That's so JG. He's like, all right, take that off my list.
Right. Yeah, don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But for I have a funny John Graham story too.
Love it. You got to share.
But for like you teaching people to hitting a 7-iron, like that stuff starts to matter. The ball being this far above your feet and stuff, it does start to matter because it affects your true path, and the dynamic loft and where it's pointing in three-dimensional space, not just the actual loft of the club, but where it's pointing, and thus the spin loft and the D plane and all that stuff. So, real quick diversion. John, as you know, was a college bowler.
Yes.
Very good. I think he got recruited to go bowling, maybe got a scholarship, the works, like was one of the top X number of people in the country at bowling. And you also know that you can be 20 feet away with a perfect putter, rolling balls from the same exact spot, and like 3 out of 10 will go in. Because they just hit like slightly different bumps, and this side of this dimple hits that little bump a little differently, and so on. So I asked John one time, I said, John, why did you get out of bowling? Like, why did you stop bowling? He goes, I just felt it was too random. And after I stopped laughing, I said, so now you teach putting? I'm like, it's just like, it's funny to me, it's funny to him, it's funny to people that know John pretty well, but I mean, putting is one of the most random things in the world. Like, there's so many little things that you can do. Again, you can roll balls down a perfect putter and make 3 out of 10 feel like you did a good job. Just because of how many little things have to go right or wrong in the exact ways that you need for a ball to go in a hole that's 4 1/4 inches big. I said his tombstone's going to read, "Here lies John Graham. He finally found an end to randomness." So I don't know. Just getting out of bowling and getting into putting to avoid randomness just seemed hilarious to me at the time. So,
AKA the Shield.
Yeah.
That was the big joke in the first couple aim-point clinics or aim-point summits we were at. It was like,
yep.
You got to ask anything, you got to ask it and take the heat.
Yep, I'd put John up to it, and he would ask it in a nicer way than I would, and then we'd talk about it after the person gave an answer. But,
love it.
Yeah. So how much aim-point do you still teach?
A decent amount, yeah. Yeah, not as many. Not doing the clinics as much anymore. Like I added into some of my putting clinics, but it's not specifically just aim point. But yeah, I still teach it quite a bit. What about you?
Yep. Yeah, it's so a good thing. It's again, not as many big clinics. Yeah, and it was always weird to me because like people would be like, well, they'd go spend $200 or whatever. They'd do the original class with the booklets and stuff, and then they'd be like, yeah, I went out to play the next time, forgot the book. And so, I don't really do it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, why did you come? Like, you made #make everything, right? You did that during the clinic, and then you just leave and forget your book. And they'd be like, the book was too complicated. I'm like, I use the book from the tee sometimes. Like, I was playing in a pro-am, and I read a guy's putt from the tee. He makes it. I'm like, let's assume it's a 2% slope. We can verify that when we get up there. Let's say you're 20 feet, 90 degrees to the slope. Okay. 22 inches. We get up there. Yeah, it's about 2%. Hit it over there. Oh, he makes it. He makes like 3 putts in a row outside of 20 feet. And the guys on the 4th green are like, get that magic book out again. And, it was pretty simple. It was pretty quick. But Express was definitely faster and easier. And,
and it's stuck.
Good enough.
Yeah, good enough. It's stuck. Yeah, like you said, it's stuck longer with students. They would actually do it for more than a week.
Yeah, I always say that you can tell which students are mine because people listening can't hear this, but like I do palm facing you because that seems to me easier than like where it puts your elbow. So like all of my students hold fingers up with their palm facing them, and everybody else does like palm facing away from them. So I don't know. If you see a guy with a palm facing toward them, that's probably one of my students.
I like it. I mean, I always tell them I don't really care as long as you calibrate it the same way.
Right.
And I got a lot of students with crooked fingers and can't put their fingers together, and
yeah,
you
get what if there's more than 4 or 5 questions?
Yeah,
so like you could put your other hand next to it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's not that.
Put your putter down. Yeah, aim point's good.
So talk a little bit about your book because I was curious to kind of dig into stats.
Yeah,
thought it was fantastic. How it came about first off, and then let's talk about some of the stats that you think are important.
Yeah, so low score wins. Dave and I had been, since we started working together, again in 2010, we'd had this idea for a book based on and this was at the start of, like, I think Mark Brody first wrote about strokes gained and how important putting wasn't and stuff relatively. Around this time, you know, we had kind of known that. We also had our own ideas about how to play golf strategy-wise. That, again, a lot of good players have been playing this way, but not necessarily putting it into words exactly like we did or something like that. So, again, not taking credit for inventing anything, but just phrasing it differently or in a new or unique way or something like that. But we've been talking about it on flights as we were flying to places to train some instructors and things like that. And finally we decided, like, let's put it on. Kickstarter rejected the idea, so we had to put it on Indiegogo to give ourselves a deadline to actually do it, to actually write it and stuff. And I had written software. I had, you know, we were also selling software again. I'd never really, like, made anything physical. And so I remember the first day we got the books, I was just so giddy because I'm like, I made this physical thing, like this real world thing that's not just ones and zeros on somebody's computer. Dave probably didn't really understand it because Dave had made and sold some physical things for a while. And so we made the Indiegogo campaign to basically force ourselves to have a deadline, you know, to meet the campaign. If, you know, it was successfully funded, you know, we pre-sold a few thousand copies. And so we wrote the book. Every Shot Counts came out about a week and a half before we sent the final version of the book to be printed. And so we were able to just sneak in a few footnotes, basically, that backed up some of the things that we had found. We had some golfers out on courses hitting a bunch of shots from 70 yards and from 90 yards and, you know, to different things to get some data for some things, different handicap levels. We did one test, it was over a span of weeks, where, you know, golfers hit to the hole that we had cut toward the left side of the green by a bunker. And then we stood there on the green with a flag held where we called it the smart target, where we wanted them to aim, but then let them play out to the actual hole. You know, and that was the start of, like, you know, the hashtag Dead Center chapter, where, you know, too many golfers aim at the flag, even from as close as, like, 50 yards. You know, or something like that. You know, if you're an 18 handicapper, you basically shouldn't almost ever be aiming at the flag. You know, and even if you're a scratch golfer, from inside 90 yards, that's when you can start to shade toward a lot closer to the flag. Especially when it's near trouble. Obviously, if the flag's in the middle of the green, you can aim at it whenever you want.
How close have you found it? Is it to Decade, to Scott's stuff? Because I use Decade like pretty much every day.
Yeah, we use a different language, and in my opinion, ours is a little bit more variable, just because we don't say 3 yards or whatever. We don't have a set number, which I recognize that a lot of people like, having just more of a set number for things. But we use what we call shades of gray, you know, where you can color shade different things and plot, like, the size of your shot zone or your shot pattern, if you want to call it that, over different things, and just kind of move that circle or that oval around to find, again, the lightest oval, which is the least amount of trouble. Or switch clubs and bring up hit a shorter distance. And, you know, there are times when maybe laying up and chipping on is the better play. If it's a really small green and, you know, you're trying to shoot the lowest average score. So I would say our system is a little bit more flexible, because it doesn't assume that your shot pattern is a certain relatively small size for a very, very good player. But it's, you know, it's 6 of one, half dozen the other, almost. You know, we're both aiming away from trouble. We both realize that penalty shots are score killers, you know.
Right.
You take enough penalty shots, you may as well play some extra holes and count them as an 18-hole score. So, you know, it's a lot easier to make a 45-foot putt or a 2-putt from there than it is to get up and down from the bunker over there. You know, that's 45 feet away from the hole on the short side or something like that. So it's very similar in that sense.
Yeah, you use, like, the SCORE acronym. in there to explain that. Like if you had to tell like everybody about like the overall genesis of the book.
Yeah, so SCORE, SCOR without the E, it just stands for, the S value, the C value, the O value, and the R value. And the R value is just related skills, so it's not really a value per se, but we liked that it spelled a word and it wasn't just SCO. So we threw the R in there. But the R is related because if you're working on fairway bunker shots, which you don't have very many of in a round, generally speaking, that's the O value, the opportunities per round. Okay? The C value is the ceiling. It's how good you can realistically get at that skill. Nobody's going to ever get good enough at putting that they make every 20-footer they ever have. You just can't get good enough at that. Nobody's ever going to get good enough at approach shots that you're going to hit every 175-yard approach shot to 10 feet. It's just never going to happen. Okay? Robots can't do it, so the odds of a human doing it are pretty slim. Robots might be able to do it, but we're not robots. And the S value is how many shots you can save by improving to that ceiling. Basically like, so if you're an 18 handicapper, we use like PGA Tour median values for those things. Like assume that basically a PGA Tour player is about as good as you can get at that skill. Okay, so yes, you're probably terrible if you're a 10 handicap out of fairway bunkers. If you get in one, you might cost yourself a shot and a half, 2 shots, right? You might be terrible out of them. But if you only have one of those every 3 rounds, you probably don't need to spend a lot of time practicing that. Okay, especially when you can just practice hitting 7-irons off the fairway, and you'll get better at hitting 7-irons out of a fairway bunker as well. I don't like the Dave Pell's method of saying, 60% of your shots are from 60 yards and in. Well, right, an average PGA Tour player has 9 tap-ins per round. That's about 12.5% of his shots. He should not spend 1.25% of his time practicing tapping in the ball into the hole, let alone 12.5%. It's just bad math, right? There's no separation. We coined the term, and we have the trademark for separation value, because there's no separation value. Everyone's going to make a tap-in. You might brain fart and like stub your putter or Hale Irwin it every now and then, but it's still not something you need to practice. You don't need to practice tapping the ball in. Tiger can tap it in with the toe of his putter. It doesn't matter. Just go up there and hit it in. Don't ever spend any time practicing it. Spend the time practicing the skills that allow you to separate yourself from players that are worse than you, or the players that you want to beat.
So what do you think are those separators? Like, what I know what I would think, but I think this is great stuff because amateur golfers. Coaches need to hear it, but amateur golfers need to hear this stuff. This is gold,
right? And it aligns exactly with what Mark Birdie had said too, which was we kind of knew beforehand because he'd written some articles about whatever. But approach shots and driving. So the full swing is the biggest differentiator between classes of players. It separates the best PGA Tour players from the worst PGA Tour players. It separates the 9 handicaps from the 15s, and the scratch golfers from the 4 handicaps. Generally speaking, it's important to say that because there are 4 handicappers out there who hit the ball like a scratch golfer but can't putt for crap. They exist for sure. There are 4 handicappers out there who can't drive the ball and would be scratch if they could drive the ball, but the rest of their game is scratch level or better. They do exist, but they're pretty rare, and they're rarer than a lot of people think. So while it's true that a lot of amateurs go to the range and just smash drivers, that's actually not as bad as a lot of people would say or would have said in the 90s or something. They'd say, you need to spend a lot of time on your putting and your short game. And you don't really need to. It's a simpler skill. Putting is a simpler skill than hitting a 4-iron from 220. The short game is a simpler skill. It's a smaller motion. There's I think you'd agree with that, right? It requires some different things.
I guess it depends on what you would determine proficient, right? Like, are we getting to get it on the green? Yeah, but to be better than that, I think you have to put some time into it.
Well, like we said in the book, if you were going to be in a contest against Rory McIlroy We used him in the book, and he had a little slump for a while, but he's fine now. He won again.
Yep.
At 200-yard approach shots, or putting, or chip shots. You'd rank them. You'd putt against him. If it had to be for $10,000. Then you would do short game against him next, and the last thing you'd do is play him against hitting 200-yard approach shots.
Got it.
Right. So we would say that. And that's generally true across all levels of golfers. You have a chance at beating them putting pretty much at any time. Again, the hole's only 4.25 inches big. If you make a couple, everyone has some hot streaks here and there. Everyone has some cold streaks. Patrick Cantlay had the 14.57 strokes gained putting.
That was ridiculous.
Round, right? Set a record. In, I think, round 3, he lost strokes gained putting. Right? Mm-hmm. Putting is highly variable as well. Okay? And people don't understand that. Golfers are generally very, very bad at understanding where they gain or lose portions of a stroke. So, for example, they'll drive the ball into the right rough, and it's kind of okay, but it's kind of a little bit obstructed by a bush, maybe, right? So they try to hit a shot around the bush, maybe curve it around the bush a little bit or something like that, but they hit it into a bunker, okay? Then they hit a bunker shot to 8 feet, which might be an awesome bunker shot for them, okay? It's a great bunker shot. Then they miss the 8-footer, and they go, darn it, my putting cost me another par. It's like, no. Like, you were only ever 50-50 at best on a PGA Tour level green to make that putt, if you're a PGA Tour player. Mm-hmm. Your bunker shot was awesome. Your tee shot wasn't great, and you lost some shots by hitting it into the bunker to begin with from your approach shot, instead of either hitting it on the green or hitting it maybe even into the fringe or fairway short of the green. So golfers are bad at understanding where they gain and lose shots, generally speaking. They're very bad at understanding partial shots. That's why a lot of people, in my opinion, blame putting, because putting has a finality to it. The ball goes in the hole or it doesn't. For every other shot, they don't understand that hitting the ball an extra 20 yards gains them a fraction of a stroke. Or hitting the ball 5 feet closer to the hole on their approach shot gains them a fraction of a stroke. Or just hitting the ball in the fringe instead of the rough, right? 3 feet away gains them a fraction of a stroke. And so fractions of a stroke are very bad. Golfers are very bad at understanding those types of things. And so, and you can imagine why, because, we measure things in hole strokes.
Yeah. You
can't get a 4.3 on a hole. But you can stand on a tee knowing, okay, players at my ability level play this hole in 4.3 shots on average. So if I par it, I made up 0.3 shots somewhere. Right? And if I bogey it, I lost 0.7 shots. I tell my college golfers all the time, and I told my daughter all the time, I'm like, Natalie, this is a par 4.5. Okay, if you make a bogey here, half the field's going to make bogey. It doesn't matter that much, right? Just don't make 6.
Right.
Okay, if you get in trouble, just get the ball out, get it on the green, give yourself a par putt, 2-putt it, maybe you make it, whatever, get out of there, par 4.5. That's fine. And there's obviously par 4.8 holes and things like that, but golfers are kind of bad at understanding that. I mean, you get on a short par 5 and they say, oh, it's a birdie hole. A birdie hole on the PGA Tour is still only like a 4.6, 4.7 average. Like most of the field isn't even making birdie there. If you have a par 5 that's averaging 4.3 on the PGA Tour, it's pretty rare, first of all. Yeah. And they'll probably call it a par 4 the next year.
they'll just change the number.
They talk about the par 5s at Augusta National. They still average over 4.5. They say 13's a par 4. It doesn't average closer to 4 than 5. It still averages closer to 5 than 4. And that's with a cut. And the better players playing it 2 more times than the players who got cut. So you look at the year-to-year stats, and it's never 4.48. It's always 4.5 something or 4.6 something. So,
it has to be so, because I wanted to get into your coaching, like college coaching, because I think that's another unique thing that you do. I don't know how you have time to do that and teach and coach as much as we do. But talk about where you coach, like how that started, and then the stats and all that information has to be super valuable to share that with your team.
Yeah, that's been my exposure to a lot of I'm in my 7th year, so we actually released the book the first year. We released the book in April or May, and I started coaching that August. I coach Penn State Behrend. We're a Division III branch of the Penn State University system. We've won our conference championship now 8 of the last 11 years. Obviously, I wasn't around for all 11 of those years. I've won it 4 out of 7. And a lot of the kids, they all get a copy of the book when they make the team. And that taught me a lot about how average golfers see themselves. And that gets into kind of talking about expectations and stuff and expectation management and stuff. Because I would have a golfer, and I saw it my first year, and I see it less and less because I start to talk to them earlier about it. But let's say you have a golfer that hits a par 5 and 2, and they're 40 feet away, and they hit a good putt that doesn't go in, and they walk up and they tap in their birdie, and they're ticked that they missed the eagle putt. And so they leave the green, and they're upset. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not a big mental game guy. I've never really, it's one of those things where, like, I've never really struggled with it, so I have a hard time, like, kind of understanding what people do to themselves mentally and stuff. But, like, I understand if you're berating yourself or feeling bad about yourself for just birdieing a par 5 with a tap in, something's not right. You played that hell exceptionally well, and because you don't understand expectations on, like, a 40-foot putt or a 20-foot putt, I don't care how short the putt was, right? I say the only time you should be upset about a tap-in birdie is if it follows a tap-in eagle. If you miss the tap-in eagle and tap-in birdie, then you can be upset. But any other time, you birdied the hole. So just be happy, Same thing like wedges. PGA Tour average from 50 to 75 yards is like around 15 feet from the fairway. Not even just all lies. From the fairway, 50 to 75 yards. So I have a college kid, he's 80 yards out. He hits it to 12 feet, and he's ticked because he thinks he should hit it 3 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, that was a world-class shot. Literally world-class. PGA Tour players would be happy if that was their average. They would lead the tour almost for that stat the whole time. I tell them the Justin Rose Sean Foley comment about how Justin said in the offseason he wanted to be a better wedge player. He felt like he was losing shots working on his wedges and wanted to work on his wedges. And Sean, when he was teaching him at the time, went away for a couple weeks and came back and he goes, Justin, so I looked at the stats and you're the best wedge player in the world right now. So, like, tour players don't understand this stuff.
Self-awareness is not
right. They don't
strength.
understand this stuff. Right. And so you get tired of kids, like, missing a 20-footer and leaving a tap-in putt. And I'm like, you're going to make that putt 15% of the time if you're a PGA Tour player on a PGA Tour green. So, you're going to make 1 out of 8. That was just one of the 7 that you're going to miss, One of the few mental game things I liked was Brad Faxon in a Bob Rotella book said a long time ago. He's like, when he was putting well, he's like, I'm hot today, And when he was putting badly, every time he missed, he's like, well, now I'm just more likely to make the next one, So, like, you got to kind of do that kind of stuff to you. That's a better mindset than, like, hitting an 80-yard shot to 12 feet and telling yourself that you suck.
Yeah.
Or 2-putting for birdie and being, like, leaving the green disappointed. Unless it was the last hole and you needed the eagle putt to win the tournament, you can't be disappointed with a tap-in birdie. So I do a lot of expectation management of not only my college players, their kids, so they have played less, they're cockier, they're more aggressive, they're a little bit more of all those things. They also haven't played a lot of golf, and they fire a lot of stuff. We had a guy, I didn't ever ask, but I don't have his permission to say who it was. But he coaches a Division II team that does pretty darn well. He flew in to see Dave and I a few years ago, and he had tracked some interesting stats before he started telling them about these kinds of things. And he found that, and I'll make up the numbers because I don't know exactly what they were, but they followed this trend. When his players made 3 or fewer birdies in a round, they averaged 73.5 or something. Okay, when they made 4 to 5 birdies, they averaged 75. And when they made more than like 4 birdies in a round, they averaged 76.
Wow.
And this was, he tracked these stats before he started talking to them about management, strategy, right? Game planning. Because what he found was that the super aggressive players made a lot of doubles and a lot of bogeys. They also made a lot of birdies. They just fired at every flag, and they occasionally stuck them and hit them close and made the putts and whatever. But they 3-putted a lot, from just getting every putt, make sure it had a chance to go in, all that stuff. And the conservative players who hit the ball to 30 feet every time, they 2-putted most of the time. They occasionally rolled a birdie in because they pulled the ball and it went, close to the hole, or they made a 30-footer. But they played really boring golf. So my kids jokingly call it Barzeski golf. It's like, just go around, like, hit a bunch of greens and fringes, and, like, if you have a good putting day, you shoot, 68, and if you have an average putting day, you shoot 73 or 72 or something, and just, keep the ball in front of you, hit it that way, and, don't get into trouble, don't get any penalty shots, and, whatever. The third hole, like I mentioned earlier at our home course, has OB up the left side. It's a par 5. I love par 5s because I say you only need to hit one good shot to make a par. Okay, you only need one good shot on any hole to make a par. Par 3s are hard because you have fewer chances to hit one good shot. It better be one of the first 2, or you better make like a 50-foot putt because you're out of chances at that point. But there have been plenty of times when I've like topped a hybrid on a par 5 for my second shot, and guess what? I still have a wedge in, so I just hit the green, and sometimes I make the birdie, and it's like, yeah, I hit like a terrible shot back there, but because it's a par 5, I have time. So the third hole has OB up the left side, so I'm not really looking at the fairway. I'm hitting it into the right rough. There's trees over there, but like, it's a par 5. So even if you can hit it 150 yards from there, you still have 120 in. So who cares, right? And if you pull it a little bit, you're safe. If you push it a little bit, again, you're punching out 100 yards, 150 yards, and you still have an approach shot. You still have a chance to hit a green in regulation. So we said in the book that of golf's traditional stats, green in regulation has the highest correlation to scoring.
I would agree.
Right? So your strategy has to be predicated upon getting on or near the green in regulation as soon as possible. And people underappreciate the value of getting near a green in regulation. And that starts to determine when you go for shots from like funny situations. Mm-hmm. If there's, let's say you're blocked out by a tree, okay, a little bit. You could chip out sideways and be 160 out, okay? But there's value in even chipping the ball down the fairway and getting to 80 yards.
Right.
And if you can hit a big cut, and maybe it doesn't cut and it finishes 25 yards left of the green, but there's no trouble over there, it's just rough or something, that's better. And if it does cut, maybe you get on the fringe or 3 yards off the edge of the green or something, that's better than being at 80 yards. So like, now, if you're going to hit the tree 70% of the time, then that's still not a good shot. But if you can pull it off to some level, 80, 90%, whatever your personal, percentage is,
80,
it varies by
rule.
the situation. Yeah, it varies by the situation,
Sure,
of course.
sure.
How big is the tree? How big is the green? Just all the stuff. There's so many variables. Everyone's picturing a different situation in their own minds, and I'm picturing a tree this size, you're picturing a tree a different size, like all this stuff, right? So it's tough to talk about these things without having specific examples and stuff, but there's value in advancing your ball down the fairway and then value in being near a green in regulation, because again, there's less separation value to be had in even a short game shot, because then you can hit the ball to 20 feet, and you know what, you're more likely to get up and down from 30 yards than you are from 80, and than you are from 160, And that's true at every level of the game. On the PGA Tour, it starts to get into, short-sighting yourself can be a bad thing. I think amateur golfers, short-sighting yourself doesn't matter as much because the greens aren't as fast, they're not as firm, And sometimes when you've short-sighted yourself, you're closer to the hole, It's one thing, if you imagined amateur golfers that are 20 yards from the hole with only 8 yards of green to work with, for a lot of them, that's an easier shot than being 50 yards from the hole with 40 yards of green to work with.
It doesn't guarantee they're going to get it closer.
Right, they don't do anything with that. They're 50 yards away instead of 20 yards. So, like, that starts to override, like, the green they have to work with, and stuff like that for amateur golfers. So, the value of greens in regulation and near greens in regulation are important. Dave and I say a good drive is between the ropes. It doesn't have to be in the fairway.
Yeah.
The fairways, like, old golf strategy books were all about, like, which side of the fairway do you want to be on or whatever. It's like your shot pattern, your shot zone is not that small. Okay, you're not aiming at sides of the fairway, and if you are, it's because the rough on that side of the fairway is fine.
Yeah.
If you're aiming at the left center of the fairway, it's because there's something bad to the right, and you're okay with being in the left rough. So it's about where you center your shot zone and stuff like that. Hit it between the ropes, find it, get it on or near the green, go from there.
So if I talk to a few of your college kids on your team, how would they describe you? What do you think they would say?
They would say that I hate stupid mistakes. I hate, because to me, my daughter would tell you the same thing. I hate the stupid mistakes because the stupid mistakes are the ones that you should be able to learn from if you do it once or twice. The thing about like how you don't fire an employee for making a mistake because it almost guarantees they won't do it again. That's fine. You can mess up once or twice, but don't keep making the same mistake again and again. That's what really gets me. I hate that. I despise that. Okay. They'll also make fun of me. I've stopped doing it quite as much, but, because at first they'd hit a wedge again to 12 feet or something like that. I'd be like, no, that's world class. That's, whatever. So, like, for a while there was a stretch where they'd chunk a wedge and it would come up short of the green and be like, no, that's world class. And they'd be like making fun of me for, yeah. So I've kind of stopped saying that specific language, but, they would say I'm confident in what I know and what I do, but they would say that I'm fair, I think, in what I ask of them. I don't expect them to all hit perfect golf shots. Again, we're Division III, so that's part of it too. I mean, they're not playing on a scholarship. I tell them at the beginning of the year, look, your academics matter more. You're not going to play golf for the rest, for your career. You might play it for the rest of your life, and I hope to help you play better golf for the rest of your life. But you're here for your career and your life, and so academics matter more than anything else right now. But golf can be great. Golf can be fun. You can learn a lot from your teammates. You can learn a lot, hopefully, from me. And so I think they'd say I'm fair, passionate about what I do, and relatively knowledgeable. I ask a lot of them in terms of, thinking and putting in the work, while at the same time not having a lot of required practices and things like that. But I hope to say that they would say they see the results if they put in the work. So
I like it.
They would also say that I have a surprisingly good playlist, so I take pride in that, considering my musical taste stopped about 20 years ago.
On road trips?
Yeah.
What would that include?
It's everything. My dad listened to ABBA, so I have some ABBA on there.
Oh, my.
That's on there. But I also have some of the newer stuff. My daughter's, 18, so I have some newer stuff, although she listens to rap, so not too much of that. I once challenged, I said, Natalie, you can listen to rap if, I listed 3 words. I said, if you can think of a song that doesn't have any of these 3 words, and she's like, she sat there for 10 minutes, and finally she's like, just listen to what you want to listen to.
Yeah, I can imagine what those 3 words are. I get it.
Yeah, well, you could pick a bunch of words, and
yeah,
you'd be hard-pressed to find something that wasn't a Will Smith song that you consider rap, I think. But, yeah, I don't know. I have a running playlist, so it's all upbeat stuff, but, There's a whole bunch of stuff on there.
So looking back on your career and sort of how you came up through the business, was there anything that you would change that you did? And then what advice would you give?
I would have shut up a long time ago and just stopped getting into conversations, discussions, arguments, whatever you want to say. I ticked off a lot of people a long time. I still do from time to time, but it was never from my end in a mean-spirited way. I'm a moron because I keep assuming that plain text doesn't have any tone to it, and other people read tone into plain text. And I'm a moron because I keep falling prey to that. I keep falling for that. I keep thinking like, okay, this is just text. I'm saying it this way. That's how they're going to read it. They don't read it that way. Like, I'm a moron. I keep thinking they will. And
no, I think you're the opposite. You're like, you're so smart that you think everybody kind of looks at it or thinks about it from your lens a lot of times.
Right. But then I'm dumb because I can't I can't learn that doesn't work that way. It's like I'm like, you're a moron. Stop whatever, stop making the same mistakes. Exactly what I just said about my college students. I keep making the same dumb mistakes. But, I've, shut up a little bit more lately. So, to anyone I've ever offended, it was never, I was just trying to, get to the truth. I wrote in the notes to you that, like, and I've said this a bunch, like, from a scientific perspective, like, I would rather somebody tell me that I'm wrong if they can tell me why. Mm-hmm. Because I've said that's an instant opportunity to upgrade my knowledge. If you can say, you're wrong, here's why. I'm not going to be offended, first of all. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say, I don't think so, but go ahead. And if you can tell me why I'm wrong, I'll be like, you know what? I see it. Yep, you're right. I had that wrong, or not quite as good as I could have had it, or something like that. Bam, I instantly learned something. Right? Somebody telling a scientist, like, yeah, I think you're right. That seems to make sense. It's like, okay, that doesn't, like, help you. That doesn't advance you. Like, you wouldn't have written it down if you didn't think it was right. So that doesn't really help you. You're wrong, here's why. Bam, that's when the eureka moments happen. Nobody who, like, has a hypothesis, I shouldn't say nobody, I'm not a always or never guy, really, but few people who had a hypothesis that came true made some shocking revelation or new invention or discovered something. It's always when you're like, holy crap, what just happened? That's when you learn something. That's when you invent something new. That's when something groundbreaking happens. What just happened?
So what do you think? What do you think falls into that category? Like in the last 10 or 15 years, like when we've started really getting into a lot of the information, has there been any aha moments for you
in golf instruction?
Yeah, in golf instruction.
The ball flight laws, not to me per se, but to the industry as a whole, was a big thing.
Yeah, the D-plane was pretty massive, right?
Yeah, so that was a big thing. Mm-hmm. I think we have small aha moments as we're better able to measure things. I still teach with a camera a good bit of the time.
Sure, I do too.
A camera helps the student more than it helps me, honestly. I read a joke, or not a joke or whatever, but like every golf lesson is like actually 5 minutes long. The rest of it is just justifying your fee, kind of. Because like to the instructor, that kind of makes sense because you know what you're going to work on in that first 5 minutes.
Right.
You've seen it, whatever. The rest of the time is getting the student to understand what and why and how, and stuff like that, and then getting them to practice it for a bit, so that you're confident that they can leave and continue to practice. I think one of the single most frustrating things about instruction is that you can give the best lesson in the world, and if the student leaves and then doesn't work on that in the right way or doesn't work on it at all, it was almost often a waste. Mm-hmm. or they might know it, but you can. I tell my wife, she teaches math. Like, golf instruction is not like math. If you teach someone how to add, and then you give them 17 plus 94, they might take them a little bit longer to do it, but they know how to do it. If you tell someone how to do something in golf, your brain is not the same as your muscles. So it takes training to do that. You can't just take your time and add. You have to like rehearse that a bunch of times. You have to train your muscles. You have to do all that stuff to do it differently. You know how to eat. You know how to feed yourself. With a fork. But if I say you're right-handed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I said, okay, for the next week you have to eat with your left hand, you're going to be like stabbing yourself in the eye for the first day. And like shoving food up your nose or something. It's going to be awkward at first. You're going to have to go slow and train yourself, and that's just feeding yourself. By day 3 or 4, you'll be pretty good at it.
Right.
But you can't just go full speed and start feeding yourself with your left hand. And so it's frustrating to have golfers come for a lesson and spend the time and spend the money and stuff like that, and then leave, and you wonder, if they're going to practice it the right way. And so the more you teach, the more you learn about certain things. So, like, the more you learn to give them drills and things like that and stuff like that. So, to ask you a question, do you see that? What do you do? You have a lot more, like, members that come practice at your club a lot, right? And we have members that are at our indoor academy that I touch base with a lot more frequently. But what do you do to help curb that? Or am I talking in left field here and you don't quite know what I mean?
No, I totally understand. It's a team effort, right? They've got to put in the work. I mean, you can give the greatest golf lesson, and like I said, if they don't put in the time, but it's not even that. A lot of times I see people putting in the time, but not doing whatever you prescribed correctly, whether it's a drill or, like you said, maybe spending time in areas of their game that really are wasteful. Like, I thought that was a really interesting point. Don't go out and practice fairway bunkers for 6 hours, right? When it's not going to be useful. Where you could maybe have the information, right, and grip down on the club, hit the ball solid or whatever, but you don't need to like spend a ton of time on it. Right. But yeah, it's that's why most of my programs are designed for long-term buy-in, which I think brings out. I mean, I want to teach everybody, but I want to teach the most serious players that really want to get after it. So if they commit to a 3-month program or a 6-month program, then I think they most likely, not all of them, I mean, sometimes life gets in the way, they're going to do more of what you ask. Right. So no, I think you're absolutely right.
As I continue to teach, like, you notice shifts in your own teaching patterns and stuff like that. Yeah. And so I think it was one of the AMG guys that said, the best drill is doing it right. And I had long ago published 5 S's of effective practice, and they were simple, specific, slow, short, and success. And success meant just doing the motion the right way. Yeah. I don't care if it's at 30% speed.
Love it.
Just do it the right way. Work at the talent code, right? It said
deep practice.
Basically, the whole book was basically work at the edge of your ability. Make small mistakes. Making small mistakes is great, because if you can make a small mistake, you can recognize that you did it. If you swing at 100% at the end of your lesson, you don't know if you made a mistake. You might think you're doing something differently. If you record your swing, it's probably going to look almost exactly the same as it did before. Mm-hmm. Work at the edge of your ability. If the edge of your ability is 35% speed at that moment, work at that, right? And that's the thing I still struggle with my college kids. They'll do it when I'm there, and I leave, and sometimes I go around the corner and hide by the bushes and watch them, and within 3 balls, they're back to just trying to hit it as full swings. It's like, guys, come on. Like, so one of the single biggest things I can teach my players is that how to practice.
Yeah,
my players, not just my college players, but all of my players, I teach them how to practice.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, it kind of goes with the earlier questions, like how do you train? I love that. That's exactly out of my playbook. Is I try to get them to do it slowly. I will put them in positions. I don't know if you heard the Dr. Bull podcast. Yep. We talked about that. I think it's so helpful for all levels of players. I mean, even though we're trying to create flow and motion and speed, you better know like what your body feels like or what the club needs to feel like in certain positions, or you're never going to get there. And I think it's so helpful.
One of the things that we have done for a long time between Dave and I is like we want to completely what we call change the picture within like 2 or 3 swings. And that means asking for massive amounts of exaggeration, what feels like to students, of course, massive exaggeration. And I say, if they're doing this thing and it's like, if you picture a number line and let's say 7 is where you're trying to get them, but they're like a 2, okay? I ask for like a 12. Yeah. Because if you can do a 2 and you can do a 12, we know you can do a 7. But if you do a 2 and then you do a 3 and then you do a 4, we don't know if you can get to 7. But if you can do 12, we know you can do 7. I love it. So like, Matt Wolf, I'll be like, show me a Matt Wolf swing, for someone who dumps the club way under here or something like that. Like, and I'm telling them to get it steeper so it's more, feels like it's across the line. I'm like, show me Matt Wolf swing and let's see what the club does on the downswing without you thinking about it at all, right? The longer I teach too, the more I teach backswing. And, whatever. The downswing is so fast. It's a reaction to the backswing. It's a reaction to where you are at the top. It's a reaction to a lot of stuff. It's a reaction to the club face. The more I teach backswing stuff.
Yeah, same here.
And my way of teaching the backswing is almost like, okay, because if you say to someone, make a backswing where you do this thing, whatever it is, their brain has to switch to the downswing before the backswing's over.
Right.
So I love to teach like a 3-step one, which is like, make a super exaggerated backswing, look around, exaggerate, move your elbow, whatever you're doing, right? Look at it, move your head, look at the stuff, just exaggerate it and see what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is stay looking at the ball, but make that same exaggerated backswing. You're not going to hit it, right? You just make the backswing, but stay looking at the ball. Then the third one is make that same motion you just did for the second one. Pause at the top so you know that you did it. If it doesn't feel right, reset. Like, don't even swing. But if it feels like you exaggerated it, go ahead and hit the ball at whatever speed you want as like your reward for having done the backswing right.
Yeah, I still do freezers like that. I'll say I'm going to tell you to go, or I'm going to tell you to stop based on what the backswing change looks like, if it's there or it's not. I think it's great. Yeah,
exactly. I'll say hit it or reset.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I transition to having them say good, or they just reset. And then I'm like, look, it's only you and me here right now, so I want you to say it out loud, because that makes them pause a little bit usually. I said, but when you leave, trust me, the instinct is going to be to like think good in your head, and the motion never stops. It's just a continuous thing.
Yeah.
So I want you to, if you're alone on the range, say it out loud. If you're not alone on the range and you feel subconscious about like saying good in the middle of your swing, which I understand, at least make sure you pause. You can get more out of, I'll tell people, you can get more out of hitting 15 balls in 30 minutes than you can get out of hitting 60 balls in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Agree. There's a lot more. I watched a kid. This was freakish. I know you run. I don't know if you liked running on treadmills. I seriously want to shoot myself in the head after about a tenth of a mile on a treadmill. I just cannot do it. My brain is not wired for that. I've tried every trick. I've tried watching television, reading books, and listening to podcasts. I can't do it. I can run outside. I can't run on a treadmill. This kid had cameras. He had mirrors. He had all kinds of stuff. He had a basket of balls. And for 2 hours, he worked on his backswing and didn't hit a ball.
Wow, that's impressive.
I don't think anybody can do that, really. Like, any sane person. I don't know what his deal was, but it was impressive. But, like, I don't ask that of people because that's nuts. Like, it's like running on a treadmill to me. I would not be able to do that at all.
Yeah.
So I let the people hit the ball as a reward on that third swing.
Yeah, but I think
at least then they see something different.
But I think there's no accident that I think the students that I connect with the best are the ones that will rehearse slowly in between swings.
Yeah, Hal Sutton sent a tweet, and he said he wished he'd spent half the swings that he spent hitting balls making practice swings, and there's a lot of truth to that.
For sure.
But I cut you off, so you were going to say something.
No, I just said that's the students that I enjoy working with, because they get the fact that the value of doing it slowly, having some awareness of what the change feels like, is much easier recognized when they do it slow, or, like I said, rehearse. I just call them slow motion rehearsals. The deep practice or the shorter swings. I mean, that's still my favorite drill, is to get people to hit 3/4 punch shots, and just have them aware of what's going on when they finish. Just simple things like that. People, they don't have the patience to do it, for one. Like, it's a certain personality, I think, that kind of bucks against that a little bit, but you got to teach them how to actually do that. That's not easy.
Yeah, 3/4 shots it just reminds me of another thing I do try to get my college kids to think. They're thinking, 150, pitching wedge. Like, every time. It's like, sometimes it's an 8-iron, guys, You got to learn to hit these different shots,
Mm-hmm.
They think yardage, this club, the end, And, but not to jump back too far, but that's one thing I try to teach them. They don't understand how to, like, play golf as much as they understand. My pitching wedge goes 152, It's like, no, it can go 130 if you want it to, There are times it goes 160, so. We got to know how to play golf and use these things as tools, and not just this club goes this far.
Absolutely.
Yeah, knowing how to practice is big. It's important. You know, I will find myself saying to people, I'll be like, look, do this much. Do it more than you think is possible. I don't care if you miss this golf ball.
Yep.
Right? We used to have a phrase from the golfing machine on a poster near our teaching area that said, if you're trying to make a change while hitting the ball, it's not going well or something, I'm messing it up, but it says it's probably because you're still trying to swing in your accustomed manner. It says, swing the right way, even if you miss the ball, until you no longer miss the ball.
Yeah, I think Homer Kelly said that. It was something that I remember.
That's what I'm saying. It's from the golfing machine.
Right. There was something about you.
So we had that quote up, and I would point to it all the time. It's like, I don't care if you miss this ball. So, like, my practice session, sometimes I'll stand there and I'll hit 5 shanks in a row, and I'll thin it, and I'll whatever. But, like, the club is coming from, like, 2 feet in a different place. Like, I'm not going to be great at it immediately. But if I know I'm confident, and I'm confident, and I'm working on the right things, it's going to be better. Honestly, usually sooner than people realize.
Yeah.
First of all, especially if they do it at the right speeds, and it will be better overall. You know, I'm not a big fan of saying like, "Oh, we have to tear down your swing and rebuild it and start from the ground up." Like, I think that's hogwash. I think that I don't understand if that's people that just want people to sign up for like 50 lessons with them or what. Like, I don't understand. I don't know what that is. Yeah. Because everybody, if they can hit a golf ball, they're doing a lot of things right. You know, they're finding a way to get the club on the ball in some way. Golf is a weird motion. They're doing a lot of things right. I tell people, you know, if you're a 12 handicap, you come to me, you can tell me 11 things you do wrong in your golf swing, and you're probably right about 7 of them. But my job is to fix the biggest priority thing at the time.
Yeah.
Because you probably do 37 things right. You know, little things here and there, but, you know, you do a lot of stuff right to be able to hit the ball and shoot 84. Golf's not an easy sport. If you can shoot in the 80s, you're pretty good.
Amen.
You know?
Yeah.
We wrote in Low Score Wins, like, if an alien who never saw humans, like, play golf, and it kind of reminds me of the Robin Williams skit, you know, about golf. If you had an alien come down and you said, here's these screwed up looking sticks, and a hole that's this big is 420 yards that way, and there's bushes and, you know, grass and you know, ponds and sand and trees and all this stuff in the way, how many shots do you think it would take to swing these screwy looking sticks and hit a ball off the ground into that hole that's, you know, 4 1/4 inches big? I think they'd say like 30.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, they'd say like 30, and we're ticked if we do it in 5. It's like, what? You know? So if you can do it in like 84 for 18 holes. Oh, and you do this one time. Oh, 18 bleeping times. You know, right? You know the Robin Williams shit I'm talking about,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, I've heard it.
Okay. So, right, 18 times. Yeah. If you can do it in 85 shots, you're pretty good. You do a lot of good stuff already. Okay? Our job is to find the biggest priority thing, because that's going to have a downstream effect on so many of those other 7 things that you think you do badly, or 11 or 12 or whatever they are. You know, and then if you can practice that the right way, you can get better a lot faster. The fastest way to get better is to go slow.
Love it.
And practice things the right way. And so that's where I try to focus a lot of time on, you know, getting people to understand how to practice. And hopefully that's what I teach my college kids. It's a little tougher when you see someone for an hour or something every 3 weeks or whatever, to get them to practice the right way. We can try to use Coach Now and things like that to stay in touch with students when they're away from us. You know, you have the benefit, like I said, probably of seeing your students on the range that you're at, because you're at a club and stuff. So that's nice. You know, a lot of the summer teaching that we did outside was at Chautauqua Golf Club, so it was a vacation spot. You know, people would come in for 2 weeks or something like that, take a lesson and leave, and it's like,
you don't say
that's a very different kind of teaching.
Yeah.
You know, it's almost like you almost have to teach a little bit more Band-Aid-y type things, you know, because you know these people are just like, this is their one golf lesson for the year, or like they'll go back and take 2 from their pro in Seattle and or wherever, and that's it. They might take 2 or 3 golf lessons for the year. So you almost have to teach a little bit differently. But for the long-time students, it becomes about teaching practice and how to work on things the right way. And one of the things that I try to stress with better players is people are weirdly bad at understanding their start lines. Do you find
Absolutely.
that? Because
Yeah.
I find, like, you're like, okay, but where did that ball start? And the ball was like a pull cut. And they'd be like, to the right? Be like, to the right? Like, what? Like, what are you seeing? Like, what are you looking
Yeah,
at? You know,
90% of my lessons, I put the goalposts, put the dowel rods
Right.
out in front of them, and they still can't figure it out.
yeah, start lines are important. So we have like some things I like to teach indoors because it lets people focus more immediately on the changes that they're making, not necessarily if the ball's going just as far or if it's going immediately straighter, or better flight or, a draw if that's what they're working toward or whatever. But even indoors, you can look at start line. You can see where it hits the net. I'll put like cones out, and if the ball falls by the right of the cone, then obviously it was to the right, and if it falls to the left of the cone, it's to the left. By cones, I mean like we have traffic cones. Dave jokes that there's free training aids available on many roads alongside here in Pennsylvania. So we have some Department of Transportation. No, I bought one of them. The other ones may have come to us by surreptitious means. But that's not the right word. But yeah, so traffic cones, sticks in the ground, like you said, the goalposts, that kind of stuff's important. We often have our better players, because there's different kinds of training, right? There's skills practice, kind of, right, where you're just working on a skill. You're just hitting full shots or something, but you're working on hitting a ball the right way. And then there's like practice or like change practice, or something like that, where you're actually trying to make a change.
Yeah.
But like an example of skill practice, we play a 30-point game with people, and it's you put a stick out there like on the target line, okay? And if you're a drawer of the golf ball for a righty, you hit 10 balls, and it's 3 points per ball, okay? So point 1 is, did you hit it solid? Point 2 is, did it start right of the stick? And point 3 is, did it draw?
Right. I love it. Yeah.
Right? And if you want to add a 4th point, it's like, did it cross the target line or stuff like that? But like, I don't love those, because like if it crosses the target line by 2 feet, like that's a good shot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your target line. So like, if you want to do that, maybe you should put a stick like too far to the left, another stick to the left, and say, did it cross that stick? But yeah, so like that's a skill building practice. So if you're going to go out to the range and at least just make full shots, at least do something like that. Don't just randomly hit balls on the range and say, oh, I think I hit the ball pretty good today, when you had no target. So you don't know if you were just pulling the crap out of every ball, but kind of hit it in the solid. Stuff like that. You gotta. That goes into teaching people how to practice as well.
Yeah, have some measurement.
Yeah.
Love it, man. Well, before we wrap up, man, you've been very generous with your time. We could go on for a couple more hours probably. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about?
No, there's a lot I haven't asked you, but it's not the show for that. I'll have to start my own podcast and have you on, and so I can ask you a bunch of questions.
That's right.
But that's one of the things. You should have a reverse guest podcast where you just have everybody ask that you've had on in the past bunch of time ask you like 5 or 6 or 10 questions.
That's a great idea.
I want to do that. You should. So that's the question.
Okay.
How would you improve Jason Sutton's podcast? So you could once every 6 months you have a reverse podcast where everyone asks you questions.
I'm going to take that into account. I really.
So what would be on your billboard?
My billboard would say.
Yeah. What's your answer?
My answer would be, if you can help enough other people get what they want, you can have everything you want. It's a Zig Ziglar quote.
Because that's the thing that I've probably thought about the most in leading up to this thing.
So you got to answer the billboard question before we close. So what
Steve Jobs gave
hold on. You got to let me ask the question properly. Don't jump ahead.
Right.
Appreciate you.
I know the question.
I know. I appreciate you being the fan. But if you had to get a message out to billions of people and put it on a metaphorical billboard, what would your billboard say and why?
Well, I used to joke that if I was just filthy rich and had money to spend, I would just put a billboard that said, don't read this, because it would be funny to me that people, as soon as they read it, they'd be like, well, crap, I read it, but that's not that funny. Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech in which he said, stay hungry, stay foolish. And so I considered that one for a while. People have different versions of foolish, so I didn't quite settle on that one. I like the idea of, and I don't know the exact words that I would use, but it's something along the lines of, I don't mind stay hungry, but I would modify that to say, like, stay inquisitive, keep learning.
I like that.
You know, that implies being open-minded. That implies thinking you don't necessarily know everything there is to know about something. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know much of anything, right? The more you learn about anything, the more you realize how little you know. You know, there's that scale where you like, when you first get into something, you feel like you learned so much and you're like an expert all of a sudden, and then you get a little further and you're like, oh crap, I don't know anything. And then you start to become an actual expert as you start to actually learn what you don't know, as well as what you do know. So stay inquisitive, keep learning might be it. Not final language. I'm not approving the proof yet for the billboard, but something like that.
That's very well said, and I think it's a fantastic way to close. Give everybody your handles, your social handles, how to find the book, how to reach out to you and say thank you. Give them all your information.
Yeah. So I teach at Golf Evolution, and our website is golfevolution.com, all one word. I'm on Instagram and Twitter sparingly at IACAS. I am cool as shit, or I adore Carrie Adina Smith, or I am cocky and sarcastic, or whatever other words you want to use that describe me. I won't take any offense to whatever you choose. So IACAS on Twitter and Instagram, and I believe Facebook, although I don't go on Facebook much at all anymore. Mostly more because the company's just terrible than, you know, I'm costing myself a lot of, I go on to read more than I go on to post, but, you know, the company itself is fairly terrible. But you know, it caused a little bit more grief than it, you know, probably deserved for me a while ago. So a little bit less on Facebook, but, you know, if you do want to find me there. Thesandtrap.com, lowestscorewins.com for those things.
You're a beauty, my man. Thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks so much for your time, and this was awesome.
I appreciate you having me on. Check my goal off there. It's on Jason's podcast, so there we go.
Awesome, man. All right, thanks so much, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, take care.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you jump off. First, big thank you to Erik for coming on the show and sharing his story and his incredible knowledge and insights on coaching and teaching. Go and give him a follow on social and give him a social wave at IACAS. That's ICAS. And also go buy the book, Lowest Score Wins. It is a must read for sure. Make sure you go to the App Store and download the Golf Guru app powered by Swing U. And give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram at Golf Guru TV. Thank you so much for that. Also, check out my website at golfgurutv.net, where you can find videos, articles, and more information on my teaching and coaching. And if you have a question or comment, you can email the show at golfgurushow@gmail.com or just hit me up on the DM. Music on this podcast is brought to you by Kevin MacLeod and Zach Mullet. And then, as I always leave you with, my mantra, the thing I live by: study, practice, teach, and then pass it on. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you next time.